Kelvin Gastelum, Chris Curtis, plus 115 for Chris Curtis, minus 115 for Kelvin Gastelum. Middleweight bout here, going to be the 40th fight for Chris Curtis, over under 2.5 rounds. Over is minus 197, under is plus 197. The Action Man, I got to say, the Action Man has been one of my favorite fighters to watch since he's been in the UFC, because, I mean, he's just all action. He fights a lot, and he's fun to watch. So, I mean, he came in the UFC in November of 2021, and he's had 5 fights. So he's a 5-fight vet in the UFC. Kelvin Gastelum's last fight in the octagon was August of 2021. So since the last time Kelvin Gastelum stepped in an octagon, Chris Curtis has had 5 fights, and he's won 4 of them. So the momentum is definitely with Chris Curtis. Kelvin Gastelum is he's only won 1 fight since 2018. But I mean, he's been fighting the best of the best. Jared Cannonier, Robert Whittaker, his win against Ian Heinisch, and then losses to Hermanson, Till, and Adesanya. Chris Curtis, though, he's fighting some solid opponents in the middleweight division, and he's coming through as the underdog, and he's a slight underdog in this one as well. So it's really hard to lay off of him, I gotta say. But I don't even like to say like the experiences with Kelvin, like maybe the championship experiences with Kelvin, but Chris Curtis, this is gonna be his 40th fight. Like, he's got the experience too. Like, I think I can't. How could I go against Chris Curtis? Like, I just can't. Even at the dog, he's good. They're gonna put him at a dog again. I have to take him. I think if this is gonna be a stand-up fair, I think he gets the better of the exchanges. The only thing that scares me is he gets hit quite a bit, but he carries that high guard all the time. Like, he's not getting hit clean, but the numbers can start to pile up on him. He gets hit 6.39 strikes absorbed per minute. Kelvin, not like a massive power puncher, could mix in the wrestling, but Chris Curtis got 100% takedown defense, man. Like, he's great at stuffing takedowns because he's not really an overthrower. He's just really crisp with the stand up. He's got a strong base under him whenever he throws. So I think he gets this one done. I can't really buy into Kelvin Gastelum either. I think the price is just like, what he once was. And even though he's only 31, I don't see him getting it done here against Chris Curtis, who is older, but at the same time, he's got a lot of momentum. And this is kind of a step up for him. He's getting a fight, a notable name in Kelvin Gastelum. So I'll take Chris Curtis.
Is Kelvin Gastelum the oldest 31-year-old you've ever seen in your life, dude?
Yes.
I was almost taken back when I was watching his fight, and just a couple of years ago, and they're like 29-year-old Kelvin. I'm like, no way, there's no way. And he just seems old. I don't know if it's because he's been around forever now or what the deal is, but only 31. But here's my knock on Kelvin Gastelum is, first of all, being 1-4 or 1-5 in his last 6 fights. He just screams like, I don't even want to be disrespectful by saying lazy, but I mean, the guy's 5'9" and he's never tried to cut down to a smaller weight class at all, where he could have found success. I think Kelvin Gastelum could have been a damn good 170 fighter. But I mean, being 5'9" at 185 is tough. And I think that's why we've seen him kind of get picked apart in some of these fights. He did have some success against Cannonier. Like, he hurt him a few times and landed some good shots. But if you're a guy like Chris Curtis and you're only 5'10" yourself, you might struggle with those taller guys at 185. I mean, Jack Hermanson, perfect example, a longer guy who stayed on the outside and just kind of touched him for 3 rounds and got the win. But he's fighting a 5'9" Kelvin Gastelum. That should play into Chris Curtis's advantage here, big time, in my opinion. And Chris Curtis has some sneaky power, man. I mean, out of his 5 wins in the UFC, 4 have come by knockout. He's knocked out Joaquin Buckley, Brendan Allen, Phil Hawes, and Sean Lally. Is it Lally? I believe that was Dana White's Contender Series. But either way, I mean, he's got sneaky power, in my opinion. And then if Kelvin, for some reason, wanted to try to go out there and wrestle Chris Curtis stuffed like 22 takedowns against Rodolfo Vieira. and was still had enough energy to throw punches and land some shots at the end of that fight. So, I mean, 100% takedown defense in the UFC through 6 fights is pretty damn good. And so I don't think that's an option for Kelvin here. I think he's going to have to stand and trade with Chris Curtis. And I think Chris Curtis is too technical. He's accurate. He does get hit a lot. And Kelvin, at times will land that big left hand, but I don't think it's anything that's going to put Chris Curtis out. I think he's tough. Kelvin's obviously tougher than hell. Izzy couldn't finish him after having him hurt like 500 times in that fight. We saw Cannonier have him hurt. He just doesn't go away. That's the thing. Like Kelvin Gastelum just does not go away. But even though Chris Curtis feels like the younger fighter here, and he's not. I just don't see a world where Kelvin Gastelum goes in there and outboxes Chris Curtis on that night. I think Chris Curtis gets this win too.
Yeah, the action man. Keep her going.